Coming up in this episode, Bafana Bafana are back, as Jabu would want me to emphasize on. It was a night of insane drama in Yamoussoukro. Has the sporting success on the pitch mirrored the financial success for CAF at this AFCON? And we get into a sticky story, looking at allegations made about Cameroonian legend Samuel Eto'o. That's all coming up in the Africa Football Showdown.
You don't feel that vibe. I don't feel that vibe. Oh. Let's go.
Welcome to the Africa Football Showdown. I'm Daniel Dadzie in London, and I'm joined by Mimi Fawaz in Abidjan and a very special guest, the happy Jabu Mtwa, who's joining us from Johannesburg. How you doing, guys?
Good to be joining you from
Hey,
Abidjan.
Daniel.
Now, let's begin by looking back, because as we say back at home, if you don't know where you're coming from, you don't know where you're going. That's a bit of African wisdom to begin the show with. The biggest shock in the final round of 16 game is where we begin. South Africa 2, Morocco 0. Morocco was the last of the North African powerhouses out of the tournament. Jabu, you host the Africa Business of Sports podcast. We're going to get into the money bit a little bit. But first and foremost, as a proud South African, take me through how it felt like watching that game.
Daniel, it was torture. Well, that's up until we scored the first goal, because we are very much not used to South Africa scoring in the first half. So games do get a bit edgy. But once Evidence Makgopa did put in that goal for 1-0 just before the hour mark, our nerves definitely went down. It was just all about defending. At the later point, when we got a free kick and Tebogo Mokoena sealed the deal for us, that was when we were really sure that we're going through. But other than that, very difficult game for us. It could have went a very different way if Hakimi scored that penalty, and good for us, he missed. So it was a really difficult game for us, but it was all built on our defense, I would say, and this is going to be the main fundamental bit of our success going forward. It's the defense. We have 3 clean sheets now. We've picked up in our group games and now in this past game against Morocco. Many people might know that 8 Sundowns players started the game, and that gives us a huge advantage, just given the experience they have in continental football and playing in hostile atmospheres. So they're definitely going to be very important in our success. But until that 1-0 went in, and then finally the 2-0 in the 95th minute of extra time, that's when we were really sure that we're going through.
Awesome. I'm so happy for you guys. Mimi, so Jabu really walks us through the defensive strength and the cohesion from having most of the players in one team. What do you think worked for South Africa?
Yeah, I mean, South Africa were very well organized defensively. And I think they were very compact and very disciplined. And they took their chances. I think coming into the game, because Morocco, one of the favorites, Morocco have had a very good record defensively since, the World Cup in Qatar. So people expected that to continue in this competition. So I think South Africa knew that going forward, they'd take any opportunity they could, getting in between the lines of Morocco. And that's exactly what they did. Morocco just were not the defensive force that we're used to seeing. And even going up front in the final third, it just didn't seem to be connecting for them. And then as we saw, it just all fell apart for them. And South Africa put that very fantastic spirited display in getting that win.
Honestly, my best part was the celebration, by the way. That Sue celebration was awesome. Look, let's listen to South Africa's coach, Hugo Bruce, and then we'll wrap up on this part of the conversation.
We needed some time to make a team. Got a lot of critics in South Africa at a certain moment because of the choices I made. But I knew what I was doing. I know the results have to follow. And even with local players now, you see they play on that high level. When they have the confidence, they can do it. And this is very important for the South African football, that we are making good performances here in such a big tournament. So let's go on.
Let's go on, Hugo Bruce says. Jabu, tell me, before the tournament, I know that very few people, probably outside of South Africa, saw a result like this happening against a team like Morocco. But What kind of expectation or what kind of criticism did Hugo Bruce go through locally?
Quite a lot, because he's made quite a lot of brave decisions. Many people know, it's pretty well documented how he's put so much faith in local players, and that's something that Lucas Radebe today on The Athletic spoke about in his piece, that this faith that Hugo Bruce is showing in domestic players, while you may think that's a good thing and the South African public will absolutely love that, but it really does seem that the foreign players, or the players who play abroad, are not so supported. I mean, there's so many great players that I feel should have made the squad for the AFCON. I mean, there's Bongogutle Hlongwane, who plays for Minnesota United in the MLS. I think has been one of the best players in the MLS over the past year. You've got Njabulo Blom, who plays for St. Louis City. There's Lebohang Matiba, who plays for Strasbourg in Ligue 1. So the faith that Bruce has showed in the domestic players, I think, has put him in hot waters. But I suppose now it's being vindicated, because these performances that are being put out by players who are playing in the PSL, which is not one of the best leagues in the world, is pretty incredible to see.
I think that's
Mimi,
interesting that you say that, because I interviewed Percy Tau when he was in Brighton, and he told me that it would be good for the South African national team if there were more players in domestic league playing overseas. That was his argument. So it's funny to see how the flip side to that argument.
Yeah, I was just gonna come to you and ask Mimi how, so many coaches have been criticized in this tournament, and Ghana's coach, Egypt's coach. The last time I was talking to Mohamed Kosba about how, a national team is not the preserve of a certain group of players. It looks like Hugo Bruce got it right.
So this is not the first time that Hugo Bruce has, experienced, I guess you could say, domestically criticism for his choices of who he picks. If we remember back in 2017, he was coaching Cameroon back then. And as well, it was by his tactics and the players that he was picking. And nobody really expected him to win, Cameroon to win against Egypt, who were in the finals. That was in Gabon. I was in the stadium. But he did. He won AFCON with Cameroon when people were pitting Egypt as the favorites in that final. So I think it's somebody that's used to a lot of that pressure outside. But at the end of the day, he comes across somebody to me that blocks all that out and just really focuses on what he feels is the right decision.
Well, it was definitely the right decision against Morocco there. But let's stay in Yamoussoukro, because that was also the scene of a dramatic win by the hosts, Cote d'Ivoire, against Senegal. Mimi.
That was quite a match. It was quite a match. I mean, the stadium was packed there were of course Senegalese fans, and you could hear them as well, the drums, the singing, the dancing. But my goodness, the Ivorian fans really made their presence felt. The stadium was packed. It was a sea of orange everywhere I looked, left, right, in front, behind me. And I feel that Ivory Coast just got better and better as the game went on. And I have to say, Emers Faye, the interim coach for Ivory Coast, really did a good job, because in the second half, he made substitutions that were absolutely key for the result that they had. They brought in Nicolas Pepe, that led to that foul that then on him, which then got Frankesi taking and leveling the score against Senegal. And then the same Frankesi, who came in the second half and was really dominant in the midfield, also got that winning penalty. And then Seko Fofana was everywhere on the pitch. You really felt the battle and them wanting to restore that pride after that humiliating 4-0 defeat at home in front of their fans. And you could just see that as it went on and on, the fans were really getting them, motivating them to get the results that they got.
Jabu, we've thrown all of our predictions out of the window. I think it was a bit of national loyalty that made Peter and Mimi keep Nigeria there, even though you must admit they had quite the lineup to end in this stage before the tournament. But did you see it happening, the way the tournament has blown wide open like this?
I mean, many people are dubbing this as the most successful, most exciting AFCON that we've ever had. And I think I wouldn't agree more. I saw a stat that the last eight of the AFCON 2021 have been completely replaced by 8 different teams for this current AFCON that we're in right now. So I think that not only shows just how exciting African football is, but the development that it's had over the past couple of years, that you're having these big teams supposedly being beaten by smaller nations. And I think that just goes to show that the gap between the bigger nations and the more smaller nations within African football is definitely being more narrow. So I think that only makes it a good thing for African football, that we've got more competitive games and also got different winners. I mean, we don't want to see the same winners all the time. So I would like, a part of me was actually a bit happy with the big boys going out very soon, because I think it just makes it more interesting for us watching.
Definitely. I mean, I tweeted that I'm not making any more predictions in this tournament. So I'm glad I'm hosting, because I'll make you guys predict the rest. I will just.
You can't get away that easily.
I'm telling. I know. Maybe you'll try and make me do something.
Yeah, you won't get away that easily.
Now, all the North African sides are out. All the top-seeded sides are out. Like Jabu said, the quarterfinalists from the last AFCON are also out. How do we even tell what's going to happen next, Mimi?
Well, I certainly don't have a crystal ball unless you have one, because we've all gotten our predictions wrong so far. Though I have to say, though when we picked the favorites that are out, I did put a caveat saying I still had hope for Nigeria to go far, even though they weren't one of the favorites coming into the competition. I think it's just a tournament of surprises. It really is the tournament of the underdogs, and it's been beautiful to see the quality of football and how much better it's gotten in Africa between the top teams and the teams that we traditionally have called minnows, who I don't think we can call minnows anymore. So it's hard to predict. So I don't want to keep getting my predictions wrong. But all I can say is that all the teams that are here this far in the competition, all of them stand a chance to go all the way to the final.
They've definitely proved themselves, haven't they, Jabu?
No, absolutely. I think the performances that you're seeing from especially teams that were third in their group and still got through, like the Ivory Coast, who are the hosts, just goes to show that you can't predict this AFCON, can you? It's all about who is the best on the day. And just as Ivory Coast demonstrated the other day against Senegal, that on their day, they can be a very, very good team. And again, anything can happen. African football is becoming way more competitive than it usually was. So you can't really make predictions about this AFCON. I've tried. I actually thought Ghana would win, and I thought Kudus would just transcend football and become this new African star, but I was so wrong. So I only can't make any predictions anymore, really.
Very, very big thank you to all of our partners across the continent, wherever you're listening to us from. If you're listening to us on a radio station, remember, you can catch us on any podcast platform, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that you listen to your podcast. We're also available on YouTube if you want to see our faces. Mimi is looking lovely, and I, as usual, not so much.
Oh, stop it.
But it's worth the watch, definitely. All right, let's get into some other conversations in this episode. It's been a wildly exciting AFCON. Goals galore, shocks galore, quality up and down from some of the smallest nations. Now, Cape Verde still going strong. Guinea, Equatorial Guinea gave us a good show, but they had to leave. Mauritania also had a huge tournament. Now, Jabu, you host, like I've been saying, the Africa Business of Sports podcast. You were concentrating ahead of the tournament on the business side. What are the numbers like? How has CAF done?
CAF has done really well, to be honest with you. And this is in the context of many problems happening within CAF over the past 6 months. Many may remember that CAF unilaterally decided to cancel their contract with beIN Sport, which is one of their biggest broadcast partners. And that did put into some sort of issue whether the sponsors going into CAF would get the visibility and the exposure that they needed. So it was very interesting to see that beIN has now come in. They've kissed and made up, luckily for all of us. But also we had an issue with SuperSport, them not being able to purchase the rights for AFCON, and that left lots of questions around whether South Africans would be able to watch the AFCON, whether all the different territories that SuperSports actually broadcast games to would be able to also participate in this great continental festival, which I think it is. So while we did have, now I'm gonna give you some numbers, but we do have some great performances happening commercially. There were some little challenges when it comes to broadcasting, and also more importantly the entry of New World TV, which definitely did cause a disruption in the broadcast rights. In terms of the numbers, Hassan Al Kamal, who we've spoken to on our podcast, put out some great stats around the performance that CAF has made in terms of the AFCON so far, and we've seen that 17 sponsors are committed to this AFCON. That is 50% more than the edition in 2021. They have 10x their revenues, so this is definitely the most successful and most commercially viable AFCON that has taken place. And that also has been demonstrated through the 40% increase in competition prize money. So making it much more worthwhile for whoever wins the AFCON to be able to celebrate. So we have seen some steps being made to make AFCON more commercially viable, more self-sustaining, more money on the table, which is made possible by the sponsors, obviously. But I think CAF's commercial team really deserve huge kudos for what they've done so far for this tournament.
I'm going to say this, Mimi. This is one of the most widely circulated AFCONs that I have observed in terms of attention that it's been getting here in the UK, in America. I know that you've been doing some reports on CBS and what have you. What's been your observation?
Yeah, I think it really started as well from the last Africa Cup of Nations. I did see that there were a lot of, if you could say, media around the world that were starting to cover it. And then it's grown since then. It's doubled in terms of the broadcasters that have jumped on board. I think it's 170 at the moment-ish broadcasters that have come on board, and sponsors. I think it was like 7 last time. It's 17 this time, I think CAF said. So it's just shown you how African football is just growing. And you can't ignore African football because there's so many African players that are playing in the top leagues across Europe and beyond. So that's why all these eyeballs now are focusing on the competition. And it's where you see as well the next set of stars emerging from it. And the quality of football has really been good in this Africa Cup of Nations.
I am personally so relieved, Jabu, that with all the attention that we got some good shows to give the world because, you know, in the past, AFCON has been a very cagey tournament, few goals, but now we're seeing 4-goal bangers, 2-goal bangers. Like, look, it's a feast for the eyes, really.
Yeah, absolutely. 2.2 goals per match on average, which is much more than the previous AFCON. What also helps, and I think not many people are actually emphasizing this point, is the atmosphere. At least when I'm watching from TV, the atmosphere within the stadiums, and I'm sure Mimi can attest to this more, has been absolutely amazing. I think stadiums always seem to be packed, bar some games, dead rubbers where fans didn't really show up. We've had over 20,000 people go to games on average, and the total attendance so far for AFCON has been over 600,000. So it's not only the quality of football that's increased on the pitch, but I think the fans have really showed up, and Ivory Coast are definitely showing how hostile an atmosphere they can create in their stadiums.
Definitely creates a hostile atmosphere.
I think it was a party atmosphere, actually. It was a lot of singing and dancing, definitely when they won.
If you are not an Ivorian on the pitch, it's not. It doesn't sound like a party at all.
There was booing when Senegal was taking penalties, but that happens. I've heard that in other matches, even in Europe. But
I have a theory though. I feel like with West African teams doing very well, their proximity to Ivory Coast really helped. Because you have, Mali, you have Senegal, which is like next door. There's Nigeria, which is like 2 doors down.
Yeah, there were lots of traveling fans from neighboring countries, and even when I've spoken to the Ivorians here locally, they've said the same thing. You've got, as you said, Ghana, Senegal, Nigeria's not too far away, Mali. I was even saying, even if people from Liberia wanted to come, they could come around. There were even fans from Togo supporting Nigeria in the Nigeria v Cameroon match. So it's been an easy proximity for the neighboring nations to come.
Now, Jabu, perhaps the most important thing will be the legacy from this in terms of, the commercial end of the game. The Super League, money from Saudi Arabia coming through. How should we capitalize on the success of the AFCON?
I mean, first of all, this has a lot to do with the domestic leagues improving, and that is a great thing for us. But looking forward, we all know that the first edition of the African Football League took place last year in October, November. And the second edition, which is going to be expanded to 24 teams starting later this year, is going to begin. And I think this goes to show it's a test case for a bigger tournament that CAF is able to host, is able to drive that commercial revenue, bring in sponsors. It goes to show that I think they're using this AFCON as a sort of test drive of how they are going to approach the African Football League, because same number of teams, although it's not going to be a club tournament. I mean, AFCON is not a club tournament, obviously, but it's the same number of teams. There's going to be lots of travel, different countries participating through the national clubs. It's going to be very interesting to see how it can be capitalized upon. But most of these sponsorships are going to end in 2025. So many partnerships that have been agreed for this AFCON are due to end in 2025. So it's all going to be about how they can extend those agreements and possibly bring on new partners, not only for the next AFCON, but looking at the AFL, which is going to begin later this year.
We're getting to my favorite parts now because I'm going to make you guys say who will win what. It's not a comfortable position to be in. Jabu, I'll start with you. You know the game I'm going to give you. Cape Verde, South Africa. On paper, it looks like Cape Verde should be an easy match for South Africa, but they qualified top of their group. They won the round of 16 game against Mauritania. What are you thinking?
As always, it's going to be very difficult. There's no easy game when you get to this point of any major tournament. And I think AFCON in particular, given the variety and also the novel sense of these new teams arriving at this stage of the tournament. I've always liked Cape Verde. I've always had a soft spot for them. With their the style of football that they play, they always seem to be very exciting to watch. So it's definitely going to be a big challenge for us, especially because we make our success off clean sheets and having a strong defense. Cape Verde have been absolutely incredible in their attack this AFCON. I think they've always been. I don't know. It's a tough one. Once again, South Africa, hopefully we come through with another clean sheet, which I think this is going to be the main thing going forward, because I trust South Africa to go into extra time and possibly go into penalties. So it's all going to be about taming that Cape Verde attack and trying to make most of our chances.
Mimi, Cape Verde's attack has been very impressive in this tournament. I think it's only the round of 16 that they scored just a goal. It's been lethal since they began the competition.
Yeah, it was Captain Ryan Mendes who scored the goal, and that was a penalty. But we didn't see Cape Verde in the levels that we were used to seeing them in the group stage. Bebe scoring, the former Manchester United player, scoring one of the goals of the tournament from outside the 18-yard box. But it's a tricky one. It's tricky. I'm not too sure what to say for this one, but if maybe I would slightly pit South Africa just because of the performance against one of the favorites, Morocco, and Hugo Bruce really being a master tactician.
I'll come to you next, Mimi. You know the game I'm bringing you. Nigeria versus Angola. Admittedly, it's probably Angola's biggest challenge in this tournament, but they also have quite the goal banger in Jala.
Yeah, I mean, Nigeria good defensively. As we know, both nations have faced each other before. They're not new to international competitions. Angola score goals. They score on average 2 to 3 goals per game. And Gelson Dalla, as we know, is right behind Emilio Nsue, who's a top scorer at the moment with 5 goals. He's on 4 goals, Gelson Dalla. So it's going to be an interesting one. But I'm going to have to say, I'm going to pit Nigeria slightly, a bit of an edge over them if they can really keep the... Of course I will. Keep the Angolan attack silent.
Jabu, you be the neutral in this one. Nigeria, are we going to see another surprise with Angola coming out on top? Or Osimhen and the rest of the team's quality is going to see them through?
Yeah, I would think so. Nigeria have done a great job of being clinical in their attack. I think they've got one of the best, if not the best, defense at the back with Dadzie and Ekong. It's a really great defense. They've got Osimhen obviously up front, who I think is probably the best player at this AFCON. So there's a lot of pressure on him, Osimhen, to really show the quality that he's shown in Serie A and the Champions League over the past couple of years. So I would think that Nigeria will very easily go through here. But I mean, you never know. Angola have the sense of a surprise in them. They've got over 5 players from Petro de Luanda, which is the biggest club in Angola. And I think that familiarity has really helped them gel together, and the cohesion is there to show. So while I think Angola really has a decent chance at it, I'd be very surprised if Nigeria doesn't go through very easily here.
Now, the team that really has brought the magic in this tournament is Ivory Coast. Mimi, MS Faye, will his magic still work against Mali? I know Mali was one of our dark horses in
Yeah,
the beginning of the tournament.
I don't know about your dark horse, but they definitely were mine. I remember saying they were they were my dark horse. I think this is a match that's going to be won in the midfield for sure, because Mali are very strong in the midfield, but I don't feel they're as strong going forward in attack. Sinayonko, yes, he scores the goals, but I don't think they've got the same attacking force going up front than they do being very strong in midfield. I think Ivory Coast they've got nothing to lose now. I mean, they got their pride back after that heavy home loss 4-0, and defeating the champions, the current champions, Senegal, is definitely going to boost anybody's confidence. And like Frank Kessie has said after that win, they need the Ivorian people to keep supporting them and keep believing them, and then they can go all the way.
I don't think they have any problem with getting support from the Ivorian people, do you, Jabu?
No, not at all. I think it just goes to show from the atmosphere, as I mentioned, that they've produced there. But one interesting thing about Ivory Coast that I saw from the last game is how strong their bench is. I mean, in the last game against Senegal, off the bench went Kessie. He came on the game. Pepe was also substituted on. Halle, who's a great player playing for Dortmund, came on as well. And Adingra, who plays for Brighton, fascinating player, also came on to have a huge impact. So while I may see this game being very cagey, Mali are really good on defense. They beat South Africa 2-0 in the opening game. I do think if we do get to a stage where a deadlock is there, Ivory Coast will definitely have the players on the bench to go in and impact the game.
I just want to say that if I ever have a child, I'm sending them straight to that Asek Mimosa Academy, because I don't know what goes on there. I don't know what goes on there, man. They definitely know how to produce the very best from the days of Solomon Kalou right up through to now. Anyway, I'm gonna leave you guys to decide between GRC and Guinea. I feel like these are two teams that we have not paid a lot of attention to over the course of the tournament. I picked Equatorial Guinea to beat Guinea in that round of 16, and no one expected DRC to be in the quarterfinals after they were pitched against Egypt, and they've done it without winning a game. I don't know what you guys think.
DRC have a great chance. They've also got really good players. Once again, I think most of teams have great players. I didn't know that Grady Diangana, who plays for West Brom, was actually from DRC. He's a great player, and he came on to score a penalty in the shootout. I think this one is a toss of a coin, really. The toss of a coin. I'll go with DRC, just about DRC.
Mimi?
Yeah, it's the same with me. I think it's quite a tricky group, because DRC, they've been having mostly draws in their games, but when it came down to penalties, they were just getting those penalties. And if it was to come down to penalties again, I would probably put my money on them after them knocking out Egypt. So I think I think DRC are the slight favorites in this one.
Okay, so Jabu, I don't know if we'll have you before the tournament ends, so I'll zoom you straight to the final. Pick two teams for me. I know you pick South Africa as one. So I'll say, if not South Africa, which one? So you pick three teams. Okay.
Nigeria. I think Nigeria will get to the final. Whether they probably maybe will beat us in the semi-final. I don't know if we even get to that point. But Nigeria, I think, would get to the final. and Ivory Coast. Nigeria and Ivory Coast, I think, would be the dream final for many, especially the commercial sponsors, because just a very small bit on this. When you have the smaller teams progressing and the bigger boys being knocked out, it's not so great on the TV numbers and commercially. So I think the best final that everyone is going to be looking for in terms of quality and the football heritage in those countries, it would be Nigeria and Ivory Coast. I think that's the final.
So if South Africa were to replace one of them, which one would it be? It's coming from the
Nigeria.
Nigeria half. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But we don't have a good omen when it comes to Nigeria, because in the previous AFCON we have been a part of, which was the AFCON in 2019, they beat us 2-1 in the quarterfinals and we were knocked out. So there's going to be a lot of revenge going on if we do win.
Okay, so at this point we have to let Mimi go. Mimi, thanks for joining us today. Enjoy sunny Abidjan. Alrighty.
I will. Thank you very much. And you guys have a good... Enjoy the weather back in London. And, of course, South Africa's...
The weather in London is not to be enjoyed. Leave me alone. Live at the African Football Showdown. See you, Mimi. I'm Daniel Dadzie here, still with Jabu Mtwa. Now, Jabu, before I let you go, a disturbing story was published by The Athletic about Samuel Eto'o, the great striker and Cameroon FA, that's Fecafoot's president. Accusations against Eto'o include match fixing, abuse of power, even making life threats, with a special focus on a match between his football academy and Kumba City FC. This case has triggered investigations by both FIFA and the Confederation of African Football, CAF. The plot thickens, with evidence including WhatsApp messages, emails, voice recordings, all pointing towards alleged misconduct by Eto'o. Adding to the drama, a former vice president of the Cameroon Football Association, Henry Njala Kwan Jr., has come forward with these accusations, providing a comprehensive file to FIFA's Ethics Committee. What should we make of this?
I mean, it's really hard to speak about this because Samuel Eto'o, in the eyes of many Africans, is, possibly one of our greatest players to come out of this continent. And to hear and read the reporting by Adam Leventile and The Athletic from this article that you're referencing right now, it's really disturbing to hear. I think also it just makes a dark cloud come over what has been a storied career for Eto'o. It is very interesting to see how he's going to defend himself to come out of this. But really, what really pulled me to the story was a year ago during the World Cup, when he was alleged to knee a supporter and pursue some violence against a supporter, which was really difficult to understand how a president of a football association would do that. And then going a step further, when he was announced as a brand ambassador for 1xBet, which is also a global partner of CAF, that was really hard to understand as well, given his role with Cameroon, and how would it make sense that he's also now the brand ambassador? There's clearly a conflict of interest there. So I must say, in a time where African football administration has really suffered from corruption, we thought the likes of Eto'o would come in with a new dawn, a new sense of leadership that would come through for African football. But clearly these stories and these allegations which are being leveled against Eto'o doesn't sort of demonstrate the progress that's been made on the administrative side of African football.
All right, then. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us for another exciting episode of the Africa Football Showdown. My name is Daniel Dadzie. I was joined by Mimi, Fawaz, and Jabu Mtwa. A special shout out to Peter Okoche, who's our big boy who cannot be with us today. Peter, we miss you. Please come back quickly. That's it for now. Catch you on our next episode, where we will be looking at the results of some quarterfinal games.
You don't feel that, man.